Now, it's pretty safe to say that when we look at Kathleen Kennedy as a producer and as the president of Lucasfilm, she has only caused so much damage to two major franchises, mind you, both of which being Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and technically 3 if you want to count the Willow series, given that that was a tragedy for Lucasfilm and actually had to cancel that show and really end it altogether. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into what's going on here with Kathleen Kennedy and specifically Lucasfilm as a company. Now, we know that Lucasfilm is a very, out of place company. It's very unorganized, and really Disney has no idea what to deal with Lucasfilm, what to do with it all. We know that a Lucasfilm purge is on the horizon that's going to progress over the next 2 years. That is a part of the general Disney purge, which is basically going to lead to a lot of firings, a lot of restructuring of specific departments over there, including the story group. Whether or not this is going to improve Star Wars is honestly a big question open on the table for discussion. Now, when we look at stuff like this, however, one major development surrounding Kathleen Kennedy that gets even worse, involving a specific series of firings, gets even all the more intense for Lucasfilm, and just goes to show you that Kathleen Kennedy has no care in the world about the fans, about the Star Wars franchise, or about any other franchise out there. I mean, let's not forget that she did play a role in the overall failure of the latest phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, given that she gave some of her big ideas to Kevin Feige about promoting all these different agendas and more, since she's a really good friend of his. Now, with Kathleen Kennedy making key decisions behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, one major development has much to do with her worst decision made in a while, that has been creating a domino effect at Lucasfilm. What Kennedy did recently was she not only fired an entire Lucasfilm team that was working on the acolyte that were going against her and Leslie Headland's ideas for stripping away George Lucas's vision, but this happened as well with the upcoming Skeleton Crew TV show for Star Wars. Kennedy recently finalized her plan to fire an entire team of creators, crew, and even some cast that were slated to return for Skeleton Crew Season 2, and yes, by the way, that has been greenlit, that has now been scrapped entirely for those creators specifically. The main reasoning behind the team's firing by Kathleen Kennedy had much to do with also the fact that the post-production has been extremely shaky for the show, and that Kennedy is looking for a more experienced team of competent creators to handle the series onwards before its release date. Now, I don't know about you guys, let me just stop here quick. I don't know about you, but Skeleton Crew sounds like the worst show on top of the Acolyte. And if you guys have been sticking with us for a while, we talked about Skeleton Crew the past couple of months. It's going to be a mixture of Star Wars meets Stranger Things meets basically, all other elements of the Goonies and throwing it all into one big mix. I don't believe it's going to work, again, and given that we have showrunner John Watts running the show there, and how he's throwing in a lot of Spider-Man elements in there, I just don't see how this is going to work for Star Wars, to be honest with you. Now, they're still aiming for that December release date, alright? I believe it's going to get delayed. It's very possible. This is why they have been holding back on a trailer from debuting and refused to show it to the general public at Star Wars Celebration last April. But moving to the next major piece here, we know that Kathleen Kennedy engaged in these layoffs, these firings, if you will, to not only make the team a smaller scale team for Season 2, but to also reduce the number of people working on post-production. Now, this has been common knowledge that Skeleton Crew has been the worst toxic environment for Disney Star Wars for basically since the dawn of time, since Disney bought out Lucasfilm back in 2012. It's been the most complex production out there, even worse than that of the Acolyte series. We talked about this and touched on this about 6 months ago, that when they were filming this thing, even many of the main cast members were having problems with Kathleen Kennedy about Skeleton Crew and the direction of the show. So, furthering into this, alright, They have also been trying to get reshoots going, however the strikes are preventing them from doing that. Many of those let go by Kathleen Kennedy from Skeleton Crew were co-writers, directors that were going to work on the upcoming reshoots and for season 2, and more. Not long ago, even actor Pedro Pascal was even fired from Skeleton Crew specifically for 2 major cameos that were going to be inserted into the 5th and 7th episode of the series. Many of those co-writers and directors were beginning to realize that Kennedy was only doing more damage to the Star Wars brand, and that much of it may not even be fixable in the future, and were questioning her and John Watt's vision for that show and for season 2, which now reportedly Disney board members have actually given the green lit for that. Now, let me just say one thing about that. This is a major problem with Disney. They always kind of jump the shark, they rush into things too fast, they greenlight things way too ahead of time, very much like what they did with the Rian Johnson Star Wars trilogy before The Last Jedi even debuted in December of 2017, and how they agreed and greenlit Johnson's trilogy in November of 2017. That just goes to show you that they really have no clue in the world about how to handle a business, how to handle a major, production studio such as Lucasfilm, and that's why Lucasfilm has really been suffering year upon year. This is why budgeting limitations are getting worse and worse every single year. It's a downward spiral at this point, and it's honestly quite offensive that Kenobi got the short end of the stick when it came to the budgeting. I mean, Kenobi got far less budgeting than that of the Acolyte series. Let that sink in. So that just goes to show you Kennedy's overall agenda of what's important and what's not, and what matters to her the most. So again, moving onwards here to the next major thing is that given that Kathleen Kennedy is yet, of course, engaged in another project on the table to control, since the majority of the board members are in favor of Kennedy running all things Star Wars, while less than half want her out and fired from Lucasfilm. Given that her contract is a complex one, this is what makes the whole situation very sticky and very much a shaky scenario. Now, the problem with the board is that it's not just the board members that are the issue. We have to look down further. It's the shareholders. Now, not all the shareholders, but the top shareholders. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. They're the real root of the problem. They are the real weed of this major issue over at Disney. And those 2 top shareholders really need to somehow really just get out of there. And they're not going to move. That's the problem, and that's the problem, big time, because we have the shareholders at the top, the board members, many of which, more than half of which, love Kathleen Kennedy and what she's doing over at Lucasfilm, and at the end of the day, I mean, given that they are giving Bob Iger the benefit of the doubt with all the upcoming major film releases, The Haunted Mansion is not doing well, by the way. There's been a lot of negative reviews on that film. Up and coming, we have The Marvels, which may very well get delayed. You got Wish, which is not even getting promoted, so that's kind of just like, what in the world is this? So they have to really improve, and I don't believe they ever will, to be honest. But anyway, guys, drop a comment below, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.